The marijuana industry. So many people have questions about the marijuana industry and what we're going to do with the marijuana industry. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about the exact marijuana industry with the marijuana industry expert. So today, as you guys and girls can see, I'm going to have a great guest today. He is the CEO of Greenlane Holding. As you all know, Kuch Company and Greenlane Holding merged. They right now have a market cap around about 250, 300 million, depending on when you looked at the market data as of late. And they are a cannabis company in the cannabis industry. We all know it doesn't take a rocket science to know that the cannabis industry will be big. But so many people are asking the question, how big would it be? How do I get into the race with the right company? So with me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not someone who's very well versed into the cannabis industry. I know it'll be a big industry, but you're probably asking the same question. Where do I start? Where's a place? How do I get involved with this? How do I not miss the bus? We don't want to say you're having a fear of missing out, but how do I not miss the bus on this? But ladies and gentlemen, if you're catching this live or if you are catching the playback, make sure you go ahead and leave a comment. Tell me where you're from and join the conversation. But if you haven't done so already, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and make sure you hit that like, subscribe, comment, and share button. And it's always welcome to the Investor Show. And let me, without further ado, the person everybody came here to see, let's give him a loud round of applause. Nick, how's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. Definitely glad to have you on. Let me see here. Okay. There we go. That's my guy, Max B. He says, let's talk about the green rush. We definitely going to be talking about the green rush we got going on. We got my guy Al there. He's live as well. He's giving up the strong sign. I guess that's what you call it when you put up your arms or whatever. And there we go. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Nick, you are the CEO of Greenlane Holding, cannabis marijuana company, and I like how you are in the ecosystem. So first of all, let's start off with, what is Greenlane Holdings?
Greenlane is a publicly traded company, traded on NASDAQ under the symbol GNLN, and we're an ancillary cannabis company, so we actually don't officially touch the plant. And that allows us to list on NASDAQ when companies that do touch the plant, unfortunately, even though they're following state guidelines, they are still deemed federally illegal. So it makes listing on NASDAQ or NYSE very challenging for them. They can't do it at this time. Hopefully that will change and they'll be allowed to uplist. But our company, given that we're ancillary, we just sell products to those companies. So a large part of our business is selling things like packaging, vape cartridges, even ethanol and butane. All of that's used in the production and the branding of cannabis. That gets it to the shelf. Then, of course, the consumer can buy at the shelf. And another large part of our business is complementary accessories to go along with that cannabis purchase. So if you go to the store to buy cannabis, you don't just want to buy cannabis, you need to buy potentially a way to consume it. This could be rolling papers. This could be, water pipes, hand pipes, dry herb vaporizers. Those range from, $50, $100, all the way up to $500 for the top of the market vaporizer. So consumers want access to this product in a lot of different ways. They obviously need to get cannabis, but they also need to get the ancillary products that Greenlane sells. And our market is huge because, of course, we can sell to anybody around the world who intends to consume cannabis.
Okay. Now, when you look at this space, everybody looks, and like how I look at it as an investor, right? I will put the disclaimer out there. Attention to everyone. This is just a disclaimer. I, Prince Dykes, has invested into GNLN. I am an investor into GNLN, so none of this is financial advice. Anything like that. Do your own research. We're just here having a good conversation. I don't want anybody to come after me and sue me, right? I don't want any problems. So with this being said, I look at the world of cannabis and I say, hey, this world, we know it's going to be big. We know this race to cannabis is going to be big, right? I mean, anybody can see this. We know that, hey, people are going to smoke marijuana. People are going to consume marijuana. I live here in Aurora, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver. And everybody know, hey, this is a good race. But how do I know I have the right horse? How do I get involved? What do you have to say to the person that knows the marijuana industry is going to be huge, but there's so many ways, there's thousands of marijuana companies out there. So many people saying we got Tilray and this one and this one and this one. So many people. How do you know how to get on that right horse?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, first I'll start by talking about Greenlane, right? Part of the value proposition for an ancillary company is de-risking that decision, right? Which horse do I bet on? And this is a good analogy thinking back to the gold rush. And I'm sitting here in California, right? But there was a gold rush. And at the time, everybody was coming out panning for gold, trying to get rich quick. We knew there was going to be gold to find, but you didn't know who was going to find it, right? And so some people got rich, some people didn't. And you know who definitely got rich along the way? The companies that sold the picks, the shovels required, the pans, the jeans that these miners bought as they were coming seeking the gold. And so the ancillary companies in the cannabis space are taking a page out of that same playbook. We're here to provide all the products that you need to get cannabis to market, whether that's your solvents to extract oil, your jars, your vape carts, your accessories to consume cannabis. And ultimately, we'll sell to every single company in the market, right? We tend to deal with the bigger players. That's our focus, but because we know that they're going to have more volume. But at the end of the day, if one player falters, there's another company probably nearby that's going to take their slot and therefore need more products from us. So we're very well positioned. And so I think that's one way for investors to look at this. Ancillary companies that are a little bit hedged to the market. Another way that we've seen investors look is they're really going after the market leaders, right? When you're unsure of who's going to win, it's always a safer bet to bet on whoever's far ahead, right? So you look at some of these companies that have 12, 13, 20 states that they have presence in here in the U.S. They're called multi-state operators, MSOs. They've got 100, 200, even upwards of 300 million in quarterly revenue that they're producing, right? These are sizable companies. They've got multi-billion-dollar market caps. And so I think investors feel safer putting their money in with these types of companies. Now, the only problem is, even as big as a company is operating in the U.S., as I mentioned earlier, they're still technically federally illegal. And so that's why many investors have invested more in the Canadian names. You mentioned Tilray, names like Aurora, Kronos, Canopy. These companies have been very popular for investors because they trade on NASDAQ and NYSE. So they get bigger exposure. You can buy them on Robinhood and some of these other platforms that you can't buy the US MSOs because, again, they can't uplist onto NASDAQ or NYSE yet. So you see more exposure with these Canadian names. The problem with the Canadian names is they can't operate in the US, right? That would jeopardize those listings that they have with NASDAQ and NYSE. So unfortunately, Canada just represents a much smaller market than the US, right? It's smaller than even, say, California, which is the biggest market here in the US, but one of many. So there's trade-offs in which direction you go. You can invest in a Canadian name with more liquidity but less market access, a US name that's technically federally illegal and has to trade on more obscure exchanges, or an ancillary company that's kind of sits in the middle, right? We have access to all of these different companies that we sell to, and we can list on a major exchange like NASDAQ. So that's what you have to weigh as an investor, and ultimately do your diligence, do your research, and listen to these CEOs talk about their companies, look at their performance, and then make your bets. And hopefully you're betting on the right horses.
Right horses. Got to get the right horse. Now, something that you mentioned earlier, you saying, hey, you know what? We don't care about the gold rush. We're trying to do like Levi's. Levi's got very popular where they brought in jeans and things like that or whatever, right? Now, what is making, I guess that probably happened during the gold rush at the time, but let's say tomorrow morning legalization happens, marijuana is not legal. Somebody just said here, right? They're speaking about the next topic I want to get into. A live comment here said growing your own, right? Now, Greenland, I know you already said Greenland is already big on being the ecosystem, providing to dispensaries, becoming the largest dispensary and things like that. What do you have to say? I want to pull this banner up at the same time. What do you have to say for self-growers? What if somebody just goes out there and says, hey, I don't want to go to the dispensary. It's too expensive. The taxes are crazy. I'm just growing my backyard. Are you in position to help out just me in my backyard who smoke for recreation versus a dispensary? And if so, how do you plan to do it? Doing that?
Yeah, that's the real exciting thing about the Greenlane platform, and one of the reasons that KuchCo decided to merge with Greenlane was to create the diversity of revenue streams, because we truly do cater to a lot of different facets in the market. Number one, we can ship our products globally, right? So we're not restricted to any geo. Obviously, a lot of opportunity here in the U.S. today. We're servicing legal cannabis companies here in the U.S. and Canada. We're servicing legal marijuana dispensaries, but we're also servicing consumers around the globe, right? Anyone can go online. So you mentioned, hey, I want to grow my own stuff at home. Great. I hope you grow the most fire weed at home that you possibly can, but you're going to have some way to smoke that. I don't want you smoking that fire weed out of an apple or a Coca-Cola can, right? We got to get you the proper hardware. And that's where Greenlane comes in. We have vapor.com. You can go on there, see the products that are available for purchase right away. And there's also a new wave of cannabis consumption. It's different types of form factors. So when you think about growing your own cannabis, that's good because you can derive high quality flower, hopefully, if you know what you're doing. But what if you want a cannabis beverage, right? Which I happen to have some in my fridge here. It's a nice emerging sector in the market for socialization. What if you want a gummy that's infused with CBN to help you sleep? These aren't the type of products that the average person is going to make at home. And just look at other industries like alcohol, for example, which is expensive, and taxed. But most people don't make their own beer. Some people do; they're hobbyists. But most people just go to the store and buy. And a lot of this pricing will get solved with mass commercialization. So part of the issue here is, I think governments have taxed cannabis a little bit too high at the onset, because they haven't given these companies the ability to get size and scale and ultimately more efficient costs, right? So you look at the alcohol industry, they figured out how to produce alcohol very cheap, but that didn't happen overnight, right? It took 100 years, these companies, massive investments in their factories, right? And so that's going to happen with cannabis. It's just going to take some time. And so at that point, pricing will come down, more access, more affordable access to consumers will come about. But again, the good thing about Greenlane is, all we want is more consumption, because at the end of the day, you're always going to need something to consume, whether it's the jar that your cannabis comes in, you're going to need that, or whether it's the pipe that you use to smoke it, or the the tray that you like to roll in, and the papers you like to use for joints, whatever it is. These are all products within the Greenlane suite.
Okay. Now I got to ask this next question. You're speaking about, okay, I'm going to just clarify. So I know you sell to the dispensaries. What about someone here? They're live. They're saying, what about the grower? Do you sell to the growers? Do you sell to the grower, the user? Pretty much Greenlane is a place that we don't care who's consuming. We just want to be there to provide. Am I correct?
Yeah. I mean, actually our mission statement is we exist to elevate elevate the consumption experience, right? And so that does start with the grower. Ultimately, we have some tools for the grower, more in the form of packaging is what we sell. We're not in the hydroponics business. There's other companies that are out there that sell hydroponic supply, like lighting and soil and nutrients to actually help them grow. We're more in the businesses of helping consumers consume, but starts with the packaging. So any high quality product you buy at a store, look at the Apple iPhone, right? It comes in a fabulous package. It's part of that consumer experience. So we specialize in child resistant packaging, which is a requirement in most states that are legal for cannabis. And it's a specialty of ours. We've got a wider range of child resistant packaging, from the most high end, beautiful design jars with magnifying glasses to, an economical bag or plastic vial. And then we move, to even in the vape category, where we sell to the processors. So, the growers grow, the processors process. It could be the same company that does both, but they're processing the flower into oil. Well, they need to put it into a vape cartridge. They need ethanol and butane to process that. We sell vape cartridges. We sell ethanol and butane. So we're capturing revenue streams along the supply chain, all the way down to ultimately the end consumer who does need a paper or a hand pipe or a water pipe or a vaporizer, dryer vaporizer, whatever, to ultimately consume that cannabis. That's why we love our platform. We're very well diversified. We're selling to multiple different customers along that supply chain and ultimately trying to capture as much value as we can being an ancillary company. We're not going to grow the plant,
Mm.
right? We're not going to actually touch the flower, but we can extract value along the way as that crop is grown, as that flower is harvested, and as that consumer ultimately takes it home and consumes it.
Okay, that makes sense. You're saying, hey, we don't care if it's a dispensary, your own user, you're picking up by the way, gas station. We want to be in all of that. Now,
Exactly.
we always heard the famous Warren Buffett always talk about the moat of companies. You got to have the moat. What is your moat? Things like that. And that's pretty much a fancy way of looking at competitive advantage. So we already know, you know, what is the strategic way of saying, hey, what's going to be that competitive advantage? Because we know other people are going to go in there, they're going to see Nick taking over the globe, and they're going to say, wow, I want to get into rolling papers. I want to get into vapes. I want to get into XYZ. What's going to be your barrier of entry to say, hey, I'm going to get into this market and I'm going to dominate this market? Because me as an investor, that's what I want to see. So what's the competitive advantage of Greenlane?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't have enough time to talk about all of them, but it starts with
Woo, I like
capital.
that. I like that. I like I like that. Give me okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It starts with capital and our leadership position collectively between KuchCo and Greenlane, who have now merged. The companies raised collectively well north of $300 million over the years. We've put that capital to work. We have a big supply of inventory that we have to store. We have facilities around the country. We've got teams around the globe. So this infrastructure, you can't build it overnight. We also have worked to innovate, right? And most investors understand when it comes to competitive moat, intellectual property is highly defensible, right? It's something that we've invented. Now this exists in many forms, whether it's a certain closure on a child-resistant package, whether it's a brand that we developed like Vibes rolling paper that's resonating really well with the consumer right now. We own Vibes. We actually co-own Vibes with Burner, who's big in the cannabis industry. He's also a hip hop artist, and that brand has a lot of brand value that can't be really replicated overnight, right? So we're building out this portfolio of brands that consumers want, building different products, innovating and bringing products to market that have intellectual property that's protected. And we're doing this with a platform that's big. We're much bigger than the competition, right? And so I think investors like to see companies that have a first mover advantage, that have got ahead, that are winning market share and are protecting that market share. One of the other things that we use is contracts with a lot of our bigger clients, right? We want to lock in that business contractually to make sure it's going to be there for years and years to come. So we do a lot to protect our business, build this competitive moat, so to speak. And I think we're on the precipice of really breaking out and further accelerating a term that is called escape velocity, right? I think we can do a couple more acquisitions. We use our NASDAQ listing. We use the access to capital we have. And all of a sudden, we're so far ahead of all the competition. Nobody's really going to be able to catch up. And if we see companies gaining traction and they're exciting, well, of course, we can then go and acquire them and tuck them into our portfolio.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Okay. And you hit right into my next topic that I was going to get into. I see this industry is kind of consolidating, where you're seeing the big fish eat the little fish. Because it's my belief, even when I look at the cryptocurrency space and even when I look at the cannabis space, I think that 70 to 80% of the companies won't even be around. Just either they're going to disappear, they're going to get eaten up. That's just everywhere. You look at hamburgers, fast food hamburgers. There's only so many at the top, then everybody else kind of gets eaten up, then it'll be little mom and pops. So in a consolidated industry with so many people of kind of buying out things like that, you kind of already touched on this in a little bit, where how do you feel about maybe touching in the grow? Because you said, hey, I don't touch the grow. We don't deal with the grow, things like that. Maybe touching in the grow, maybe coming to Denver and buying up all the little mom and pop dispensaries. Is that even something that's on the horizon in this consolidated industry? How do you look at that?
Well, look, I think for us right now to be able to maintain our listing on NASDAQ, which is very important, gives investors access to the stock, through GNLN on any platform, more liquidity, right? There's a lot of value in that. And I don't think we would disrupt that by moving into the plant touching business, right? We also don't want to compete with our customers. Our customers own grows. Our customers own dispensaries, right? We don't want to compete with them. We want to support them. We want to help them grow. What we would look to do, though, is buy other product companies. So if we're selling, a wide array of products that, has, really resonating well with the consumer, papers and pipes and the things that we sell, and we see another product out there that's really gaining steam and consumers are gravitating toward, we might buy that company, right? Put that into our portfolio. And then that's just one more thing that we can stock
Nick,
on the shelves at the dispensaries that we service.
I want to touch into this. So if you saw a new company buying had a hot new product, would you be more interested in creating that product or purchasing that company?
Well, if the company has a great brand and they have intellectual property that's protected, and they're gaining and they've got sales and they're running the business well, then we would probably just buy the company. If we see a product on the market that's really early and it's wide open and we can make that product ourselves, then we wouldn't spend the money, right? So it's going to be a case by case situation. But the other thing that we have to that we should talk about here in terms of the industry consolidating, you're absolutely right. We're a little different. We're on the ancillary side, but we expect more consolidation in the ancillary side as well. We're seeing massive consolidation on the plant touching cannabis front. And you mentioned, like you see all these companies, many of them aren't going to be around. We're already seeing, I mean, there was a bankruptcy filed earlier this week from a company that's actually publicly traded. That's a California product brand that's known in the market. And so again, it's hard to run a small business. What we do know is these cannabis entrepreneurs, they're very street smart, right? And they figure things out. So surprisingly, people predicted more bankruptcies. We haven't seen quite as many. We have seen a lot of acquisitions, and we expect to see more. And I think everybody's looking to get scale, right? They're looking to get size and scale. They're looking to get their brands into multiple states throughout the country. And ultimately, they're looking to pull costs out of their business. Now, one of the things about our merger between KuchCo and Greenlane is we announced $15 to $20 million of annual cost savings that we intend to pull out of the business. So again, as a small company, it's hard to be profitable and it's hard to grow profitably. But through consolidation, through M&A, you can become a much larger company much more quickly and pull out a lot of the costs, make that business more efficient and therefore more profitable. So expect to see more companies do this over the coming years. And then we'll really start to see who the winners are that are emerging. I think there's some companies we know now are going to be winners, but it'll be much more clear in the next 3 to 5 years.
Is Greenland one of those?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. That's all I want. That's all that matters.
Because you're riding with us, so I know we're winning now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Now I got to ask this question, right? You touched on this earlier. You know what? I want to ask you this question. What makes this, put your CEO hat on. I know you always got on 24/7 anyway. You spoke about some companies going bankrupt. Oh, there it is. See. So I want to ask this question. What makes it where some of the smaller companies who are going bankrupt, why can't they raise the capital like Greenland has been able to what's the hard thing about it?
Yeah. Look, it's very challenging to raise capital in the cannabis industry. And that's why so many companies have gone public. But there's a very big difference between going public on the OTC market or the Canadian Securities Exchange, right, where the volume and liquidity is much lighter and there's not a big institutional participation, right? Because really big institutions and funds, they try to stick with companies that are listed on the big exchanges, right? They have the volume and the liquidity. And so as a publicly traded company, we have access to capital, right? We go out, we meet with investors all the time. And if we wanted to raise capital, we use an investment bank to help facilitate the process of bringing that in. Again, companies that are public on other exchanges can do that, although it's a lot more challenging, right? A much more limited pool of investors that you can go to. And now if you're a private company, it's very, very difficult to raise capital in this sector. Who are you going to go to, right? Now we're finally starting to see some of the traditional tech venture capital company or venture capitalists come in and support companies that are technology related. Again, not touching the plant, but software companies and things like that. To invest in a plant touching cannabis company, like a cannabis brand, you don't have your traditional CPG investors coming in, right? That would invest in a Kind bar or one of these other food products. They're not touching cannabis yet. A lot of your larger, bigger dollars, they've shied away. Why? Because it's a new, nascent, emerging industry. It's federally illegal, right? They don't understand it. So it's going to take time. So these companies are trying to find ways to get capital. A lot of them start with friends and family. And then what happens when that runs out, right? You've got to find somebody with big pockets that's willing to write a check into an industry that's federally illegal. That's hard to do as a private company. As you move into the public markets, it gets a little bit easier. And as you move up onto NASDAQ and NYSE, now you have real broad access to capital. But still, the sector is severely undercapitalized. And I think when it becomes federally legal, that's when the capital is really going to flow in. And so a lot of investors that follow this space and have invested in the cannabis stocks, that's what everyone's looking at is as a catalyst. And so they're saying, hey, we don't want to, you mentioned, missing the bus. We don't want to miss the bus because the bus is leaving, and it's not just a bus. It's probably going to be a rocket ship, and it's leaving the second this industry becomes legal at the federal level, right? And so they want to get in now because they know when that happens, value should significantly improve, and so they want to get the upside. And it's been rough. The cannabis sector hasn't done too well, and I know there's a lot of investors out there that have money in the cannabis sector. It's been a rough last couple of years, and a lot of the investors that have conviction around this industry, they know how big it's going to be. They say, "Hey, I'm riding it out. I'm keeping my money in because I know one day this is going to legalize at the federal level, and my investment's going to go through the roof. And I want to make sure that I've got as much chips in when that moment hits as I can possibly afford to have."
Okay. Well, very important that you said this. You must be reading my notes here, but you went straight into legalization. So if you had to bet everything you own, when do you think marijuana, just your personal opinion, when do you think marijuana will be legal at the federal level?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, if I had to bet everything I own, I have to hedge that out. I'd have to say 10 years. But if you ask me honestly, I think it's going to be within the next 2 to 3 years. It would be my guess. Reason being, a lot of reasons is, I think the pressure is mounting. Actually, just today there was a letter signed by a lot of people. I actually signed a letter myself calling for clemency for Biden, President Biden, to grant clemency and basically wipe the records of folks that have been convicted for cannabis, considering it's legal in so many states now, right? And people are still in prison today. So look, we're putting pressure as an industry. Advocates are putting pressure. This was an organization led by an individual, Weldon Angelos, that he personally was in prison for sentenced to 55 years for selling marijuana. He got out in about 12 years, I believe, and he's now teamed up with the Koch brothers, with Snoop Dogg, with the whole range of characters, and everybody is saying this has got to stop, this hypocrisy, right? Let's get these people out of prison that shouldn't even be in there in the first place. So with this type of mounting pressure, now you have a leader, Chuck Schumer, who's saying he wants to legalize cannabis. The Democratic Party wants to legalize cannabis. I mean, we're getting closer and closer. The problem is there's always going to be people that continue to try to block and continue to try to hold off until the last second. But I really do think the next 2 to 3 years, I think the pressure will be too much. We already have 75% of Americans wanting it to be legalized, right? So, you've got elections coming up. I think this is an opportunity. I actually wrote an op-ed that was published in Fox News, and I said, hey, Trump's going to lose Arizona because cannabis is on the ballot. And when cannabis is on the ballot, you get a lot of voter turnout. People love cannabis. In fact, people voted more for cannabis than either presidential candidate. Right? We had cannabis on the ballot in 5 states. It passed overwhelmingly. Yet, we had an election that we didn't even know the winner of until, 24, 48 hours later, right? So we know cannabis is popular with the voters, and I think smart politicians are going to use that to their advantage, right? If you're somebody who can break this down and get it legal, you're going to reap the rewards. And if you're one of these folks that's continuing to fight, well, you might get voted out of office. So I think people are taking this more serious. We're also coming up on the 10-year arc of when Colorado first legalized. It was voted in 2012, and it officially went legal in 2014. What's interesting about that is if you look back at gay marriage, that was a 10-year arc, right? From the first state that legalized gay marriage to finally the federal government under Obama legalizing federally. And so we're coming up on that right now, either later this year, if you look at the date it was voted in, or in about a year and a half, if you take the 2014. It could be right in that window that cannabis is legalized as well, right within that 10-year arc.
Okay. Now I got to ask you this question. This is not a political show, but this is something that I kind of look at. Cannabis started with a lot of momentum in the beginning of the year. Right when the election happened, it's like, oh, President Biden, he's going to forgive student loans and he's going to legalize marijuana and, blah, blah, blah. And he had a lot of momentum. You saw marijuana kind of started building up on the anticipation because, it was on the Democratic side, everybody was kind of pro cannabis legalization. Now that the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the president, I was wondering, like, okay, so what's holding this up now? Like, okay, I can see if you at one time they didn't control the Senate, then they didn't control the House for a while and things like that. I'm like, why can't they, since it's more Democrats in the House and Senate, and you have a sitting president that's a Democrat, what's holding this up? That was one of the things that kind of threw me off. So it seems like, hey, we want to help you. It's like somebody's reaching out to help you, but they got a ladder right behind them. You're like, hey, well, why don't you, now I'm not a political analyst. That was just one of the things that in my head, I've always seen legalization being that big roadblock that cannabis need to get through. Then I finally saw the people get into play. I thought like, wow, this might be a slam dunk in a matter of time. But now we're worried about the infrastructure bill. Not saying that the infrastructure bill is a bad thing, but that has taken over and they're looking at doing $1 trillion spending plan for the infrastructure bill. So
yep.
now
it's unfortunate.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because we, that the sector was fired up thinking that was going to happen. I think that's why it's cooled off tremendously because it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened soon enough. Part of it is look, it's partisanship for sure. It's also generational gap. I think a lot of the younger folks in office, regardless of party, support more progressive cannabis laws and drug laws in general, where some of the older guard doesn't, including President Biden, who's certainly not young. He has draconian views on cannabis, although he does believe it should be, or has said that he believes it should be decriminalized and prisoners should be released. We'll see. We sent the letter today, so we'll see if he follows through on that commitment. But I think it's going to take, like I said, more and more pressure. We also have a little bit of an issue here where there's a middle ground, right? There's enough Republican support to get something done. That something is probably going to be something like the SAFE Act, which allows banking services for cannabis. That's a step in the right direction, getting the federal government to allow the banking system to legally bank cannabis. Big step. But you have Democrats that say that's not enough. So you have Democrats that say it needs to be full-blown legalization, it needs to be record expungement, it needs to be social equity, which of course I agree with. But the question is, do you hold out for the whole enchilada, or do you get a bite at the apple, right? And start chipping away. And most people in the industry would say, hey, let's take the deal that's on the table today, right? There's enough Republican support for a middle ground deal. Let's take that deal and then let's go work on the next deal, right? Let's make that incremental progress to ultimately get where we want to go. So a little bit of that is frustrating, right? Because you have folks that want legalization, but they really aren't fighting to get that incremental win that I think is available right now if they were open to taking it. And so hopefully they change their mind. There's talk that maybe they will, and there will be a compromise and we'll get something out maybe in Q1, I've heard. Might not be full-blown legalization, right? But could be safe banking, something like this. So we're all here on the edge of our seat, and again, I think everyone in the industry, has been waiting. We saw the excitement in January when everyone took office, We're not even, we're not even in October yet, so there's still plenty of time. But midterms coming up about a year from now in November, so we'll see. It's all up to the elected officials. And what I like to tell people is, if you don't like what your elected officials are doing, elect someone else.
Like,
Right? I think people need to be held accountable here. They make commitments; they need to get it done.
okay. And I think that my personal opinion is, I think that if they don't get it done by November of next year, I don't think it's going to happen during this term, during President Biden, at least his first term. Because, this is the prime time to go ahead and get this knocked out before you have all these seats change out next November, which usually happens. Now, I want you to explain, you touched on this earlier. I forgot, what's the word you use for when you don't touch the grow? You are
Non-plant touching or ancillary.
Okay. Non-plant touching. So people say, hey, this marijuana growers, it's an illegal business. That business cannot become a publicly traded company because it's federally illegal. But then people scratch their head, investors scratch their head and say, well, how do all these marijuana companies exist? How are companies illegal but publicly traded? Can you clear the air on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so essentially what it is it's been a very hands-off approach, right? And originally under President Obama, there was a document called the Cole Memo, which was essentially guidance for attorneys general out there that could essentially tell them, hey, don't worry about companies that are operating within the state legal frameworks. They're fine. Worry only about folks that are violating that or doing illegal marijuana sales. So everybody said, okay, that's good. There's a memo that we can sort of get behind. It gives the lay of the land, and we're on the good side. We're okay. So, that got a lot of people comfortable. And then, next thing you know, there's a company that took in. I'm actually on the board of the company. Now it's called Unrivaled. But before it was called TerraTech, and they were the first company that took a leap. They were publicly traded. They weren't touching the plant. They were an ancillary company. They were in the hydroponic supply business, and they decided to acquire a group of dispensaries. And they didn't know how it was going to go, but they made the acquisition, and ultimately the SEC allowed it. The DOJ allowed it. And next thing you know, you got the first publicly traded plant touching company. And it was on the OTC. So again, NASDAQ and NYSE have never allowed plant touching companies, but TerraTech, which is now Unrivaled, ticker symbol UNRV, and I am on the board of Unrivaled. Companies have been able to go public on the OTC, and then Canada opened their doors. But again, not the main exchange, which is the Toronto Stock Exchange. They're still saying no. But a smaller exchange that was traditionally, around for mining companies said, okay, we'll take that business, right? It was a smart move on their part, because now they got hundreds of cannabis companies that have gone and listed their shares on the Canadian Securities Exchange. And then they cross-list down here onto the OTC. But these are all sub-tier exchanges, right? These aren't the real big boards, right? We're talking NASDAQ, NYSE, Toronto Stock Exchange, the AIM in London. There's, the ASX in Australia. Most of the bigger exchanges, all of them, have essentially said no. But the smaller exchanges have taken the risk because they can reap the reward, right? It means a lot more to them to be able to list cannabis than it would mean to NASDAQ, right? NASDAQ's doing just fine. They've got a lot of listings coming their way.
So, and the downside to that is less liquidity. So if a company getting listed on there, is not as much liquidity to make money from doing it. So
exactly. I mean, look, if you look at someone, look at Tilray and what they trade, and it's phenomenal. I mean, they have a great platform there with the Tilray listing, and they trade amazing volume. Compare that to say a market leader in the U.S. Like a Curaleaf or Green Thumb. The volume it's night and day. You're talking about one company that's trading, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars in a day, compared to another company that maybe is trading, 10 million on a good day, right?
okay.
So it's very different, and unfortunately, that makes it harder to access capital. that makes it harder for sellers. Of they do M&A. Sellers want to exit their position. It's harder for everyone. It keeps the stocks lower than they probably should be if you look at the fundamentals, right? So all of that gets fixed with a comprehensive bill, and these companies are allowed to uplist, and you can imagine what that might do to their stock price, right? And that's why everyone's so anxious for that happening, and that's why investors are getting in now so they can get their position and be prepared for that event. Again, none of us know when exactly that will happen or how, but I think the general consensus is it's a matter of time. It's a matter of when, not if.
Okay. Well, Nick, definitely thank you for coming on. I want to offer this time up now to say, is there anything you want to leave to the live audience now, or the audience is going to catch this on the playback? What do you want to say to them?
Well, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for caring about the cannabis industry. I think it's a once in a generational opportunity, right? Once in a generation opportunity to create wealth. If you're in the industry, right? The industry is hiring. We're hiring. If you want to work in the industry, take a look at the industry. It's really fun industry to work in. If you want to invest in the industry, obviously, this is a brand new and it's actually one of a kind, right? Because even when you had brand new industries emerging in the past, like let's say VHS or DVD, you kind of model how many people might buy this, right? And there's X amount. We don't have to guess in cannabis. We know that millions of people are consuming cannabis right now in states that are illegal, around the world where it's illegal, and it's not going to be a matter of can we get consumers to the market? It's just, can we get the laws to change? Can we make it legal? And so we know the demand is there. It's a very unique opportunity. And this is the time to take a look at it. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for looking at Greenlane, ticker symbol GNLN. And we are traded on all of the popular apps like Robinhood, et cetera. And also please check me out on Twitter at Nick Kovacevich. I got to get back to doing some tweeting. I've been too busy with this merger, so hopefully I can get back out there and keep sharing with the folks and that are supporting us. And thank you guys for doing that. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy as we try to get out of this pandemic. We're almost through it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again. My name is Prince Dykes. This is the Investor Show. And to the next video podcast, cartoon, or whatever else crazy you see me doing around the globe. 1 second here. When he said, I'm going to have to catch the playback. Okay, yeah, definitely catch the playback. All right. So hopefully we got, we had the live comments. Thank you, everybody, for coming in live and leaving the comments, all the other good things like that. Definitely enjoyed the conversation there. So definitely. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages, until the next video podcast, cartoon, or whatever else crazy you see me do around the globe, my name is Prince Dykes. This is the Investor Show. Peace, be safe. I'm out, and thank you.